To this week's edition of NCompass Live. I am your host, Krista Porter, here at the Nebraska Library Commission. NCompass Live is the Commission's weekly webinar series where we cover a variety of topics that may be of interest to libraries. We broadcast the show live every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time, but if you're unable to join us on Wednesdays, that's fine. We do record the show as we are doing this morning, and it will be available on our show archives for you to watch later at your convenience. I'll show you at the end of today's show where you can access all of our show archives. Both the live show and the recordings are free and open to anyone to watch, so please do share with your friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, anyone you think might be interested in any of the topics we have on NCompass Live. For those of you not from Nebraska, the Nebraska Library Commission is the state agency for libraries, so we would be similar to your whatever state library. So we provide training and resources and databases and grants to all types of libraries in the state. So you will find shows on NCompass Live for all types of libraries. Public, academic, K-12, corrections, museums, archives, historical societies, et cetera, et cetera. Really, our only criteria is that something to do with libraries. Something cool libraries are doing, something cool we think they could be doing. We bring in guest speakers from all across the country. And we also have Nebraska Library Commission staff that do presentations sometimes on things we're doing here through the commission. And today we have a mixture of that. It is the last Wednesday of the month, so that means it's Pretty Sweet Tech Day. Yay! The last Wednesday of the month is always when Amanda Sweet, who is our Technology Innovation Librarian. Good morning, Amanda.
Good morning.
She comes on the show always last Wednesday of the month to talk about something techie. We sometimes have shows that are not techie other times of the month too, but you can always guarantee that Amanda will be here. Guarantee almost, and I'll explain that later. The last Wednesday of the month, almost every month. So if you are the tech person at your library or interested in tech and libraries, this is the time to make sure you show up. And today she has brought in a guest speaker, Rex Duvall. Good morning, Rex.
Good morning.
And he is going to talk to us about AI and learning for early childhood and all sorts of things that libraries can do for this. So I'll just hand it over to you, Amanda and Rex, to talk about what we're going to hear about today.
Yeah. So I actually ran into Rex. I think Brian was the one who introduced us. Yep.
Brian Pitchman?
So, yep. Yeah.
Our good old friend Brian Pitchman. He's a regular on the show, regular a couple times a year. That's regular for us.
I meet with him all the time, so that's regular.
Yeah, for you. Yeah. Brian has been on the show many times. If you're interested in technology type things or emerging technologies, he is great for that kind of thing. Check our archives.
We're doing games and gadgets at CIL if anyone's going. That's what we had.
Yeah. The Computers and Libraries Conference next month in DC, DC, Crystal City, wherever it is, close enough. Last week of March, yeah.
So aside from all that, I'm just going to turn it over to Rex to talk about all the cool, awesome, wonderful things that he's doing. And then at the end of it, we'll splash in a little bit about a pilot project that we're doing.
Nice.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, thank you both. And thank you to everybody who's on the call here or watching at a later date. You'll have to forgive me. I've got two screens here. So if you see my eyes glancing, it's hard for me not to look at Amanda and Krista staring back at me here. But excited for the conversation here and to dig in a little deeply on two really hot topics right now. Obviously, AI is everywhere you look and everywhere you turn, but also thinking about social emotional learning and the role and importance of that, especially in early childhood, and how libraries could step in to fill the gap, as they so often do, for families, caregivers, and kids in the most important stages of their lives. So excited to get into it with you all. All right. So first, a little bit about myself. We've got a few fun pictures here from wedding day to early technology fascination and to some good old books that we all love on this call. So on me, I am the co-founder and CEO of Nookly. We are an AI platform for unlocking personalized learning in a more scalable way, where children can see themselves in inclusive materials that engage them and that help enrich not only their social and emotional development, but also their literacy skills. So by way of background, worked in industry for quite a while, had some startup experiences before that. My wife is a therapist and actually was the person whose challenges when it came to engaging with kids unlocked my interest in this space. I have a long love of libraries. I remember being a young boy going and visiting my family in Michigan and going to the library because they had the computers where we could all play games. But they're near and dear to my heart. And now as a technologist, I don't think it's any accident that what we're building is something that is technology based. So awesome. So for the conversation today, I want to cover some ground here with you all, from trying to demystify AI and think about particularly the role with libraries, talk a little bit more about social emotional learning so that we could all understand that as we're working with caregivers and children. Also think about some of the implications of AI's role, where libraries could step in and fill the gap, and then leave some time for questions. I will say, just to warn everyone, I do like to make this a little bit more interactive. So there are no wrong answers. I appreciate any participation that we get, but it's always a little bit more fun if it's more of a conversation than just me talking, as much as I love to hear the sound of my own voice. So with that,
Yeah, anytime anyone, and if anyone came in late, before I mentioned this earlier before we started things up, any questions, comments, anything you want to share, use the questions section in your GoToWebinar interface, type in that box, and I'm monitoring that here on my computer for Rex and Amanda.
perfect. Awesome. So getting started with demystifying AI a little bit, and with our first interactive activity. I told you weren't going to have to wait long. So would love to poll the group with a simple question. What words come to mind for folks when they think about AI? No wrong answers.
Yeah, it could be anything good, bad. The very first question, comment that comes up is Skynet.
Skynet. It's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that just covers it all. Yeah.
Right.
We'll give one more minute, see if we can get one more respondent.
Got some more people coming in. Yeah, go ahead and type in anything you think of. Like I said, there's good, bad. Are you curious about it? How are you, wondering if you can use it, if you should be using it?
A question mark works. I don't know what to think.
Data, this is all coming from one person. Data, statistics, generative, training, trust issues, helpful, terrifying.
A lot of things. Terrifying.
Ethical standards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all important, all not too surprising. I think
environmental concerns.
Yeah.
Yep.
Really good.
Impact of server space is real.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you all for participating. You'll have more options to do so. So that was just a trial run. I've asked this question before, and I think some of the responses that I've seen in the past are covered here, from Skynet to maybe not.
Hello, Hal. Yes.
But we've got, scary. I think there's so much in that word that I think is triggered when people think of AI, and exciting is kind of this interesting interplay between the two of those. So there are a lot of emotions when we think of AI right now. And so for me, I've thought a lot about this and am evolving my word, but the one that is currently my go-to is superpower. And superpowers are very interesting because they could be used for good, but they could also be used for evil. And so that is really reflected in this broader zeitgeist of how folks are feeling about AI. There was a big survey that Google, I think with Pew, put out, and it was a global survey about how folks were thinking about AI. And this industry and space is changing so fast. I'm sure these numbers will look different day to day, but there's a lot of potential. A lot of folks are excited about it, with this 54% of respondents thinking, okay, we'll have some broad benefits to society from this. But then there's 5% of folks that think it will cause extinction. So there's
and I assume there is like everything in between too, of just the good or evil, but that it's going to be, it might be useful, but I'm concerned about the climate change that was on your thing there, the inaccuracies of it. Every time something comes up that comes across my feeds, my social media about, oh, look, they didn't know it. AI didn't know this, gave people the complete wrong answer. And it's basic information that if you had just Googled or used your search engine of choice and not done the AI, you would have gotten the top answer would be correct. I mean, that kind of thing kind of stuns me. What is AI actually using to find these answers if we already have Google, for example, giving the correct answer?
It's so good. I think that the feeling of magic when it comes to AI makes the emotions a little bit stronger. And then you don't often think about, okay, well, if you Google CEO, you'll predominantly get images of white men, right? I think they may have all changed that a little bit, but you're constantly interacting with bias, right? And so it is important.
Critical thinking, like on top of everything, yes.
100%. But the danger here is that the AI can sound so confident, we'll get into that a little bit, that it can actually perpetuate that bias further. So it's important for us to be clear-eyed about this superpower, from the pros to the cons. And so one way that I think is a really helpful starting point for us to think about this, and some folks might think this is a little too trivial here. We're not in a computer science course, so we're going to keep this high level and relevant. You get a lot of different buzzwords when people are talking about artificial intelligence, right? As a company that's focused on visual learning and visual aids, I think the graphic here is very helpful. You could think of AI as the broadest category here, right? This is the computer science field that's focusing on mimicking and training systems to behave as if they had the intelligence of a human being. It is relatively vague, but it's because it's hard to pin down. You'll also hear a phrase about like machine learning that comes up a lot. So sometimes AI and machine learning are used interchangeably. That's not quite technically correct. So machine learning is really a subset of this broader AI category. And it's when the systems that are leveraging machine learning are improving on their experiences with data. They're not being explicitly programmed, right? Not a 1 + 1 = 2, but with this data, how can we have predictions? How can we learn and improve the models that then would be AI models, right? So this last one I'll be pretty quick on is you sometimes hear about deep learning. If you've heard that before, you're probably more advanced anyway. For the purposes of our conversation today, we're not going to talk much about that, but deep learning is where things like neural networks come into play, and really trying to use the human brain as inspiration for us when we're building these sophisticated models. So that's our AI jargon 101. But I think something that's really helpful and underappreciated is that AI actually is not new, right? So AI isn't new. And I think that understanding what that broad definition of AI is helps us appreciate the fact that this isn't new. It's generative AI, which has emerged on the scene in the last few years that is new and is remarkable, right? So when we think about old AI, we can think about predictive AI, right? So machine learning techniques using historical information and data to forecast or predict future events or outcomes. We don't have to raise hands here on how many people have Instagram on their phones, but if you're thinking about the algorithms that are predicting what you would like, right? Those recommendation algorithms that Netflix use when you're trying to get to the airport the following day and you book your Uber or look in Google Maps and you're getting predictions about how long things are going to take. That's AI, but it's not this generative AI piece. The generative AI angle that is unique is the idea of novel or new materials being created based on inputs or prompts from a human or even another system, right? You could have different AI systems that are talking to one another and prompting a generative outcome. So a helpful distinction here is that an AI that produces a unique bedtime story, right, that isn't a copy paste of something that's been created before, but does not exist until the AI creates it, would be an example of generative AI, in contrast to a more predictive AI approach that would say, based on what we know about this child or this family, what books might they like, right? Still AI, but a different and important nuance for us to understand.
And machine learning is a term, I think it's been around for a long time. That when you showed that previous slide, I was like, oh yeah, machine learning. We've known about that, heard about it, used it with not a lot of concern or issue. I mean, people, oh yeah, machine, sure.
Yeah,
It
100%.
didn't give people that emotional response, I guess. Yeah.
And the majority of commercial applications of artificial intelligence are machine learning models right now.
For sure. For sure.
But then we never questioned the training sets that went into it, but I digress.
Yes. I mean, there's a big field in the responsible AI space that has definitely gotten some juice with the adoption and investment that's going into the generative AI. But there have been ongoing conversations in this field about biases in the training data that goes into ML models for quite some time. But again, it lacks some of the flashiness that the generative AI kind of applications make you feel. And there are some truly remarkable capabilities with generative AI, where that's why there were no wrong answers in the beginning. And it truly is something that deserves our attention. And so I'd love to maybe feel free, audience, to let us know how you've used generative AI in your own lives. Some of the applications that I've used to help bring this to life and make it more tangible are, I'm cooking dinner and I've got a limited set of ingredients left in my fridge. What can I make with those, right? And it'll give me a novel combination of the different things that I have and adjust based on even the amount of ingredients that I might have. I was going to my cousin's birthday party. I wanted to have a cute song for them because they're young. And so the AI was able to help me generate that song. The rewriting an email for more clarity is a classic example of how folks are using it. Amanda and Chris, I'm not sure if you guys have any examples of how you've used it. But if anybody in the audience does, I'd be very curious to hear.
Yeah, so type into the question section. We have one already. Someone said they used ChatGPT to create a podcast script based on an inside joke.
Love it.
Okay.
So good.
I had to write a data stewardship policy a while back, and I used perplexity.ai and started generating and drafting template ideas.
Awesome. Really good.
I also loved in the word cloud where someone said weird fingers, and I knew immediately what they meant.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a nice one. I used it to send a threatening email to my homeowner's insurance when they were dropping the ball on my claim. It worked.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I'm happy to hear that that worked.
Chat GPT for my routines and work schedule. And someone said for work, use the summarizing aspect for legal research.
Yeah, so good. And in a lot of ways, I mean, one of the biggest startups in the Gen AI space is a company called Harvey. They're doing some really cool stuff when it comes to legal research. So you're not alone on that use case. So what is interesting to me and to all of us here, given the nature of this call, is that a lot of the uses and the ways that people think about it today, especially, are more for these more personal productivity, administrative type productivity tasks. I think administrivia is a word that I've heard recently when talking about what AI is really good at. And it's so true. It really does excel there, but that's not where it ends, right? So this is a food for thought question, so won't ask for any answers right now. But when we think about AI and generative AI, you'll have to excuse me here. I'm going to fall into the trap. AI, for the purpose of the rest of this call, is referencing Gen AI or generative AI. So how do we think of it as an unlock for engaging with families and engaging with youth, and not just improving some of our own, tasks that we've got to get done or calendar management? Is there a way for it to help us build deeper connections with the individuals and families that we're serving? That's the big question I'd like us to think a little bit about. And so as you're all mulling this over, I would like us to spend a little bit of time just running through some of the strengths and weaknesses here. So let's think about the strengths as represented in so many of the examples that folks provided. Efficiency. When you're coming up with those templates, Amanda, writing those summaries, or for coders that are doing coding, it's incredible efficiency gain. Idea generation, right? How should I approach the homeowners insurance folks? What are a few different options that I could do? Great for that. Personalization, right? Tailoring the content. I want this email to be a little bit more strongly worded versus a tone that I would ask for in that song that I made for my cousin's birthday. On the weaknesses side, though, there's a lack of context if we don't provide it, that without which the outcome or output falls short. So context sensitivity is key, right? The AI that's scanning the internet and relying on this historical data might not know that my cousin had an issue with a bully in her class. And so as I'm creating that, even though it does help with personalization, if it lacks that context, it's not going to show up. Factual inaccuracies, right? The first result on Google can sometimes have the right answer. If you ask most AI tools out there how to spell strawberry, it gets that wrong constantly. There's a human creativity gap, right? If there's an emotional insight that we need to bring to bear, that's not always there. Some tools do a good job with mimicking human emotion, and the tools are getting better at this. But as we already kind of covered with that context sensitivity, human emotion, human creativity is still really key and really important. And so, like any superpower, to kind of tie out this point of the conversation, we need to be careful. As a fan of comics, with great power does really come great responsibility, and we do need to be constantly thinking about what biases the AI might have, as we've already discussed. We need to be on the lookout to not get tripped up by the confidence with which the AI produces outputs. And we need to understand the intention behind the individual that used AI to create something, right? This gets us into a whole conversation about deep fakes and maybe that end of the world challenge, but the intent is key. Because while people anthropomorphize AI, which is just a fancy way of thinking of AI like it's a human, it's not. It's machine, and it can be pointed in dangerous directions if the person doing the pointing has malintent. So all things for us to think about, be conscious of, and be aware of as this becomes a bigger part of our lives and the lives of folks that we're there to support. So back to this question that I posed for us on engaging with families and youth. There's two buckets that I'd like to dig in a little bit deeper with us on. The first is SEL, or social emotional learning, and the second is literacy, for ways that AI can show up and actually help improve the experiences in these areas. So for any good conversation about where we're going has to come from an appreciation of where we are right now. The COVID-19 pandemic, as many of you obviously know, has had lasting impacts on both of these dimensions from an emotional perspective, but also reading perspective. So the National Center for Education Statistics has put out a study. Reading scores for 9-year-olds have dropped really significantly, 5 percentage points from 2020 to 2022. So there's really been a negative impact there. When we think about behavior, 87%, which is just a remarkable number, of public school survey respondents have said that there was a negative impact on social emotional development of kids due to this pandemic. And although we might like to think that this was a long time ago, these kids are still being impacted by this. And those that they serve are still having to navigate the ramifications of what we all went through. And so important for us to understand. So when we think about social emotional learning, I'll start there because I have a feeling that literacy is something that we're all much more familiar with on this call. So for social emotional learning and why it's important, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, it's an organization called CASEL. They're really social emotional learning and really spreading the importance of it, especially in the early childhood and youth years. There are 5 buckets that they identify when they're talking about SEL. So self-awareness, understanding your own emotions, thoughts, values; self-management, not just understanding those emotions, but actually managing them in order to direct them towards achieving a goal; relationship skills, pretty self-explanatory. Same with responsible decision-making, and then also social awareness. So it's not just self-management, it's also having empathy and being able to perspective take so that you could understand that someone might be coming from a different perspective, how they might be feeling from that perspective, and empathize with them. And so these 5 categories are wonderful. A shortcut that I like to use when thinking about SEL is it's what are the non-core academic skills that any human being needs to have successful, build an emotionally helpful self-understanding. And so we all know what social emotional learning is. I think sometimes the term gets politicized, and we're not going to spend time talking about the merits of that. Really, for the purpose of this conversation, it's to frame the importance of developing these skills for any child that is growing up and who we're supporting and working with. And so when we think about how parents perceive these type of social emotional skills, many of them, especially for early childhood, kind of under the age of 9, say that their child's social emotional development is just as important as their academic learning, which is just a remarkable number. And this was a poll that came out prior to Gen AI really being something that we were constantly interacting with and immersing ourselves with. There's an interesting aside but kind of something for the next wedding reception that you're at, is how AI will really reprioritize or impact what we perceive as mattering most when it comes to a child's education, right? With the introduction of a calculator, it influenced the kind of approach folks took to math as kids were learning. As AI is really good at doing the administrivia, to reuse a word again for the cocktail hour, how is that going to impact what is prioritized? There's a big school of thought that thinks there'll be this big transition of folks that are working in more kind of rote job roles that will shift to being more human to human support. Huge problem of loneliness in this country. How will things shift in this new world impacted by AI? And will the role and importance of social emotional learning just increase? I'm biased, I think it will, but we can cover that in the Q&A if folks want to dig in on that more. So something that's important to realize is social emotional learning, not just important, but and perceived as by families as important, but families are struggling right now. And so a report that came out last year from the US Surgeon General really highlighted this in pretty stark terms. But 75% of parents battling with concerns over their child's mental health, parents feeling incredibly overwhelmed, overburdened, almost 50% saying that most days, which is a wild detail, their stress is completely overwhelming, right? So families that we're interacting with, caregivers that are providing support, are going through something quite difficult right now, and it's not the easiest thing to put our fingers on the why, but it's important to understand where folks are emotionally when you're interacting with them. That's 1 out of every 2 parents that might come into a library are feeling like this when it comes to feeling overwhelmed or overburdened. So as we're talking about social emotional learning and perspective taking, it's a good moment for us all to reflect as we're thinking about how we engage with folks. So that's my social emotional learning spiel. Hopefully there was something interesting for y'all there. But transitioning here to literacy, and not just literacy from a numbers perspective, but the interplay between literacy and engagement. And so there's been quite kind of evolving academic literature on the role of reading engagement over these last 2 decades. So in the early 2000s, when educators were thinking about what is reading engagement and how can we leverage it, there were kind of 2 buckets. There was behavioral engagement, which is the reading behavior. How long is a child reading on their own time? What's the variety of materials that they're interacting with? Those are all inputs to higher probabilities of, hitting your literacy benchmarks and thriving. The other side of this back in the 2000s was this effective engagement idea. So the emotional connection that children have to the reading influences how engaged they are and supports literacy development. As the literature and study of this has evolved, we've been adding things to this idea of what shapes real reading engagement. There's cognitive engagement, which was the 3rd bucket of this to emerge. This is the mental effort that children are investing when they're reading, which impacts, the energy that they're going to invest into decoding unfamiliar words, understanding new vocabulary, etc. And then this last piece that is kind of rounding out the 4 elements to engagement is social engagement. So this idea that when we're not just reading in a silo, but sharing our experiences, when we're reading things with others, when we're discussing topics and books, it drives engagement, and ultimately that has a positive output on literacy. And so, like so many and so much of this, it's not surprising necessarily, but having language and understanding the different dimensions can help build a more nuanced understanding of how we can reverse the trends that were so jarring around literacy scores for kids. And so this is where we'll come back to AI and think about how it can unlock an opportunity here. So where I'd like to start is the role of personalization. And so personalization, historically, very costly to do with technology. So if we're talking about a custom 3D animation, 1 minute can cost up to $20,000 historically, which is just mind-boggling when you think about it. For 2D animation, it's less, but still in the thousands of dollars. So one of the big impacts that generative AI is going to have here is completely shifting what you'd call from a business world, the cost structure of personalizing content. Because all of a sudden we can quickly customize content and really shape it to fit the purpose of the materials. Kind of going back to some of the examples that we discussed earlier. So when we think about personalization, it's shaping a message or an experience to align with the audience, right? I think personalization is a word that gets tossed around quite a bit. So helpful for all of us to level set on a slightly more generic but encompassing definition of what that means. And so like what so much of us know, again, in our bones, but it's helpful to have kind of the studies and support to back this up, there is a profound role that increased engagement has on both literacy and learning more generally. And it's not rocket science, right? It's not deep learning, let's say, to be able to kind of take the step back and say, okay, when I'm engaged, I remember. And so the studies back this up, where 75% of students that are feeling more engaged and motivated when the materials that they're interacting with are personalized to them. That a really big study that came out with 49 different studies around reading engagement resulted in significant improvements to fluency, word reading, comprehension. Again, not rocket science, but an important nuance, especially when we're thinking about how AI can show up for kids and youth and families. And so, as much as I do love hearing the sound of my own voice, I do want to take a step back and ask you guys all a question of why do we feel like stories are such a powerful learning tool? And maybe a way to prompt this is, if folks are comfortable sharing stories that have meant a lot to them personally, I'd love to hear that, and I'm happy to start. So The Jungle Book was a story that I used to love growing up. I will never forget when the tiger Shere Khan is being teased, doesn't respond in anger, and my dad looks to me and says, you know, that is power, where you're not driven by your emotions to respond with how you're feeling, but you're able to control that there's power in that. And I just remember that so vividly because it was wrapped in the context of a story. So that is mine. I would love to hear, even if you're comfortable coming off mute and sharing, would love to hear what stories have impacted folks.
Yeah, go ahead and type in the question section. If you notice from anything I've read off there, it's all anonymous, no personal. I'm not letting people know who's typing these comments in or anything. Nobody has access to that. So whatever you want to share.
Yes, some of the stories that I actually really liked growing up were when they told the stories from lower income families. Because I come from a lower income family, like that's how I was raised, but most of the stories that were out there were like Sweet Valley High, which is like a middle class to upper middle class family, and it wasn't something that I could personally relate to. But then on the flip side, you had the boxcar children who were in like a completely opposite end of the range, and I'm like, that's closer. I'm not quite boxcar, but that's closer.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes, I mean, it goes to what we were discussing here previously around like inclusivity and engagement, and how when you could see yourself, the impact that that had on you was much more profound. Thanks for sharing
Representation
that, Amanda.
matters.
Yeah.
That's an important thing. Representation matters and everything. Yep.
100%.
And there was
When I
not a
think you're
lot
gonna
of,
learn better from something that is like, oh yeah, that's me. I can
yeah.
I can do that too. I can learn how to, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I went to down the street from us, there's the Francine Finch, and they carry a bunch of like the Native American children's books.
Nice.
And I wish that they had more of those when I was a kid, but I bought all of them for my niece and nephew.
Love it.
You know?
Yeah. So good. All right.
Um,
Well, I keep cooking here, and we can let people take that home and maybe have that discussion around the dinner table. But I think that it's undeniable that stories are such a powerful tool. And that personalization component, Amanda, again, thanks for sharing that, because it's just so true that when we know representation matters, and we don't necessarily need a study to, again, know that truth in our bones here. So pivoting a little bit to, the home of so many incredible stories of libraries and the role that libraries play and how this interconnects. So what are libraries? Well, I know for me growing up, libraries were really a safe, non-judgmental space for me to be, where I was able to not just play those computer games, but actually develop computer literacy skills, get access to stories and books that my family in our small New York City apartment didn't have the space for, with key resources and a place for media mentorship. Really this marvelous place and haven for families to go to when they need support, for youth to go to and really develop their curiosity. And that has ramifications for the rest of their lives. And so when we think about some of the statistics here, these are taken from a 2023 survey that was done by the Public Library Association, and found that 47% of public libraries were lending hotspots for home internet use for families that didn't have reliable access to that. That libraries are offering ebooks, audiobooks, digital checkouts for kids to have and build their digital fluency at home, right, or on the go in the case for audiobooks. That there's not just the provision of resources, but the stepping in, filling in the gap, and actually offering trainings for families and kids. And back in 2023, I would imagine that this number is just continuing to go up and expand. That AI comes up more than, or the majority of the time, when different technologies that they wanted to develop digital literacy training around. So the role of the library as a haven and home for digital fluency and development, and this clear overlap with where AI is going, is just crystal clear here. And so relevant, important for us to be thinking about. I do want to show just one option for how AI can show up and be applied very practically as a tool for engaging with others, right? Not just that personal productivity. There are a lot of really exciting things that are happening in this space. Obviously, I've got a niche with what we're building at Nookley, but I think that I really hope everybody walks away from this conversation with kind of more excitement around what can be impacted positively from AI, not just what we do and our angle on it, but the way that we're doing it and thinking about it is the use of AI to personalize storytelling, language learning, and make tools that were time consuming to create or difficult to do more accessible, so that we can simultaneously unlock the time constraints placed on librarians, placed on teachers, placed on therapists that unfortunately don't have unlimited resources, while also creating more engaging, dynamic experiences for kids. So there are a few different ways that we do that. Obviously, storytelling is at the heart of what we do and really was what brought us into it. So with a tool like Nookly, you can share a learning goal that you have, a topic for a story, something generic. The AI will help you co-develop the plot of the story. It acts as your co-pilot, though. It is not there to just replace the creativity process. It enables you to personalize the materials so that the child can see themselves represented, and then it will create those materials in an engaging output that makes the child, excited to interact with it, kind of going back to those 4 components of engagement that we discussed earlier. I'm not sure if this will work. I think it is here. This is just a quick example to kind of bring the AI to life on what it looks like to create a story. And folks are doing this in group story times. They're sending these tools home with families. There's the ability to create lullabies and interactive songs, doing that with the kids themselves, and kind of a fun way to introduce them to the power that AI can offer. When we think about personalization, it's a lot of different ways to think about it. I know we talked about definitions earlier, but it's not just what the child looks like, but trying to think more nuanced about, okay, if this child comes from a family where there's not a mom and a dad at home, right? Maybe grandma's the main caregiver of this particular child. Then they can interact with stories where they can see that represented, not parents that they don't have at home as the kind of co-protagonists in any different stories. So the AI will process it, draft it, you're in control, you're able to edit the materials, make sure that they're exactly what fits the context. Going back to some of the strengths and weaknesses of AI, we know that AI is really good for producing things in a fast way, but sometimes lacks the context and the emotional nuance that any good storyteller would need if it's creating content for a particular kid. So what is showcased here is we've identified what the main character will look like. We'll pick some avatars that resemble the characters and supporting cast members that we'd want in this story. And then the AI will generate the content. And then all of a sudden you've got something in 2 minutes that you would have had to invest a lot of resources in to try to create without the support of the AI. So this is one of the tools that we're really excited about when it comes to storytelling, but wanted to showcase just how AI can show up and be used in the real world.
I think that that previous slide you had before the video, that third step is something that a lot of people are missing. Don't just take whatever AI gives you and use it. You've got to look at it and see, oh, is this actually what I wanted? It might need some tweaking. Is everything accurate? Is everything correct? Well, like Amanda said, does everybody have the right number of fingers? That kind of thing. Don't just blindly take what is spit out and put it out there.
Yep.
Because you're gonna, possibly 9 times out of 10, you're gonna look like a fool if you don't look at it first and then decide, oh wait, it didn't do it right, or I need to do something myself, or it gave me a good idea, but now I'm gonna do it myself because I can't use what it actually said because of these issues with it. And I think too many people are not doing that third step with all types of, I know this is specifically your steps for doing this, but I think it applies to everything AI related. People are missing that last look at it first. Maybe it's not really what you want.
Yeah.
It's like even with the data governance stuff and anything that I generate with AI, like I think of it more as a tool to overcome blank page syndrome.
So good.
And sometimes like that little launching pad just kind of opens up the imagination and opens up, like helps you get started instead of just staring at a blinking cursor on a screen and going, oh my God.
Totally. It's that, I mean, with a lot of the tools, they're called or referenced as co-pilots. And I think that those are the most exciting tools, really, as ways to unlock the human creativity and the activities that do make us human. I mean, even one example of this, I know we've talked a lot about the stories component of how we're thinking about it, but speech is also something that a lot of kids struggle with, right? And so thinking about if we're learning the word like buried for when I'm burying something, and that's a struggle for me, if we could bring that to life in a more visually compelling way, and that can help expedite the development of language. We can think about this in a literacy related context as well. Then it can just expedite the skill acquisition so we can get to and expand upon those elements of our humanity that are unique, right? That creativity and all that can be unlocked there. So totally aligned with what you were both saying there. I think those are really spot on. I know that we are coming up on time, and so just take a step back and think about what to take away from this. I think it's important for us to recognize that this superpower, because of its power, it's not going away. And it's important for us to kind of learn from the experience of social media. When that first came on the scene, very similar superpower-esque type qualities, right? And a lot of the time, or looking back at how that was viewed when it was first emerging, was trivialized quite a bit. But ultimately, it has impacted the lives of kids and this generation that grew up with it in ways that we're just starting to understand and react to. So instead of being reactive to it and letting the technology act on us, it's important for us to be, from my perspective, very clear-eyed about what it is, what are the strengths and weaknesses, what's the intent of the individuals using it, and then how can it be leveraged for good so that we don't fall into that 5% bucket of it ending the world. So definitely think that AI should be embraced, but doing so responsibly is key. So that is the talk here today. Thank you all so much for the time. Please reach out if you'd like to connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn, and you've got the email here too. So thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rex. Yeah, this is lots to think about, lots to look into for libraries to see if this is something they would want to be involved in. We do have, anybody have any comments, last minute questions, anything you want to ask? We do have time. We won't get cut off right at the top of the hour. Now we'll go as long as people have questions. We got thank you coming in. I'm excited to bring AI technology to our library this year in our youth services program. Cool. Thank you, presenters.
And this is probably a good little time to say that the commission is doing the pilot with Nookly right now. So you might know that we have the tech kits or the mail service where you can kind of check out different kits and kind of try it out and find out what's going on, or just use it for your own regular programming and activities. So we're going to try something with Nookly just to see how this all kind of, see what people think about it. Let people give it a try, and we'll start kind of a dialogue about how libraries can use this, what we want to happen, what we don't want to happen, and all that cool shiny stuff.
And Amanda,
So how is this trial going to work? I mean, this isn't, usually you lend things out, physical things, through the mail.
Yeah,
So
this one is actually going to be credit based. So I wanted to just throw like a small little budget at it and said, what can we do for just $2,000? Then we figured out a way to do a credit system just so we can kind of get a feel for it and start testing the waters in our libraries. And so this will be, we'll use up those. Rex, can you remind me how many credits it was?
Yeah, I think it was 6,650 credits.
Yep. Yeah. So we'll go up to that credit bump, to that credit cap, and then we'll just start gathering the stories, gathering kind of like the use cases of how libraries are taking to it, start generating like a little ooh, there's a word, it is gone. AI probably knows. Um, like a lookbook kind of thing, sort of like a gallery of how libraries are using this. And then once that pilot is over, then libraries are going to be able to either get their own subscription or start to figure out how they might want to use that service or something like it.
So this is coming soon. It's not, or are you
Yeah,
reaching
it's
out to?
not, so we're still kind of dotting our I's and crossing our T's to get the marketing materials together and start getting everything pushed out.
Okay, cool.
So the
So don't go looking
anticipated,
on our website right now for
yeah,
it, but
yeah.
look for an announcement coming about
This
it.
is your teaser trailer.
Yes.
This is, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And Amanda, you used a word I just want to put in bold around dialogue. So the goal that we have in this pilot is, yes, to support the work that everyone is doing in providing these stories that we know can be so transformative to folks' lives. The other tools like the song creating tool that we have, where you could create custom songs with kids and personalize them and loop in videos so that they can see characters like themselves. Some folks are providing it to families that might have children struggling with some speech challenges and are using the visuals that we build around speech and language acquisition. But it's really to understand and enter into dialogue of how should we be building this tool in a way where it can have the largest impact that it possibly can, and kind of in that spirit of not letting the AI kind of be the one driving the
Yeah.
influence on our jobs and on kids, but kind of joining our movement here to try to build something with the human as the driver, so that this can become as useful as possible.
Yeah. And then we'll use this as kind of a template tool to figure out how we can build out different resources and activities and facilitator guides that'll help libraries introduce AI with intention instead of just as a cool, shiny thing of the moment.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You need a plan.
A little bit. Yeah.
Jump in. Don't just jump into this cool shiny thing just because it's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, something to look forward to. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, thanks so much, Rex and Amanda. This is great. I'm going to pull presenter control back to my screen so I can do my little wrap up here for today. There we go. Yeah, so thanks so much, Amanda, for bringing Rex here. So much, Rex, for being with us. They said lots of good things to think about with AI. I think some good explanation of how it works, and that the whole social emotional learning issue for children is very important. So I'm glad we got some good background and information on that. So as I said, today's show has been recorded. If you use whatever is your search engine of choice and type in the name of our show, NCompass Live, you'll get our main page and our archive page. I'm just going to click over to our main NCompass Live website, where you can see here's our upcoming shows, but right underneath there is the link for our archive shows. Most recent one at the top of the page. By the way, our last show was Brian Pitchman talking about the Consumer Electronics Show.
That was shiny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Today's show will be here at the top of the list. Should be done as long as GoToWebinar and YouTube cooperate with me by the end of the day tomorrow. Everyone who attended today's show and registered for today's show will get an email from me letting you know when the recording is available. We also push out onto our social media. We have a Facebook page. Go back. There we go. A Facebook page for NCompass Live. So if you like to use Facebook, give us a like over there. We remind people, here's a reminder to log in today's show, intros to our speakers, and then we were off last week when recordings are available. So you'll be notified of that on here. We also use the, so our show has its own page. We also use the Nebraska Library Commission's Instagram and Twitter account. And we use the hashtag NCompLive for NCompass Live, and we add in Pretty Sweet Tech when it's a Pretty Sweet Tech session. So keep an eye over there for when the recording is ready. You can search our show archives if you're looking for to see if we've done a show on a particular topic you might be interested in. And I'm not going to scroll all the way down, but this is our full show archives going back to when NCompass Live first premiered, which was in January 2009. So I can't believe I have to say this. 2025 is the 17th year of NCompass Live.
Epic.
And yeah, anyway, all of our archives are here, all on the Library Commission's YouTube channel. Just do pay attention when you do watch something that is old. Pay attention to the original broadcast date. Everything has a date, so you know when it originally happened. Many things will be good and useful information, stand the test of time, fine to watch, but some things have become old and outdated. Resources may have changed drastically. Links might be broken. People may work at a different place than when they actually presented for us. So just pay attention to that original broadcast date before you watch anything.
Link rot is real.
Yeah. So that's it for today's show. Next week, we will be talking about digital accessibility, breaking barriers, importance of digital accessibility. We have another guest presenter coming on, Pam Doran from SUNY Empire State University in my home state, New York, will be joining us to talk about that. So please do sign up for that session if you want to, and any of our other shows. We've got everything booked through March, and we're starting to get into April too. The last thing I want to mention is another online event that we host here through the Library Commission. Big Talk from Small Libraries is in 2 days. It's this Friday. Big Talk from Small Libraries is our annual online event that we do, co-sponsored by the Association for Rural and Small Libraries, ARSL. And this is a one-day, all-day Friday online conference, free, open to anyone to attend. So you can go ahead and register now, spread the word. All of our presenters are from small and rural libraries with an FTE or population served of 10,000 or less. That is our cutoff as far as what a small library is. So this is something we've been doing for also quite a few years, since 2012. If all of our previous recordings over here, if you're unable to join us on Friday, the entire day will be recorded, and then it will be broken up into individual recordings for each session, so you do not have to watch an 8-hour recording. But
Appreciate it.
you want to do whichever ones you would like to watch. Our full schedule is posted here on the website, so take a look and see if you want to join us on Friday. Registration is open through the end of the day Thursday, and then on Friday morning the link will be posted online for everyone to join on the fly as well. We also have a Facebook page and a Twitter account for Big Talk, where we post reminders and information about meeting our speakers, and so you learn more about the different sessions that we are having. So sign up for Big Talk. Sign up, register for a future episode of NCompass Live. And I think that's everything I need to talk about today. Thank you everyone for being with us, and I hope to see you all on a future episode of NCompass Live. Bye-bye, Amanda. Bye, Rex.
Bye.